welcome to the Popcorn Square. I am your host, Kage.
With Neff.
And Buttons.
And today we are going to talk about Ghostbusters. Today's episode is called What's Old is New Again. I think we all know what that means. What was old is now new again. Ghostbusters is making a comeback, so to speak. We're seeing, we had Afterlife that came out in, 2021? Mm-hmm. Am I right? And recently we had Frozen Empire. Now I'm speaking to you as a fan of the 80s movies. Just for perspective, I was not born yet when the first movie came out. I was 5, 6-ish years old when Ghostbusters 2 came out, and I absolutely loved it back in the day. I had I'm going to get some laughing here in a second. I had a proton pack. I had the slime. Buttons is already looking at me. I had a bunch of toys and stuff, and then the cartoons came out, and I remember seeing Ghostbusters 2 in theaters, and before that came out, my uncles went and got me Ghostbusters 1 on VHS. So, needless to say, I have some history with this movie, very near and dear to my heart. But first and foremost, I just kind of want to go around the table and talk about just Ghostbusters with us individually, talking about what do you know, what's your fandom, did you have a fandom, did you grow up with it? So just going around the table here. Neff?
I've never really been into Ghostbusters. I know about it and stuff like that. What really wasn't my thing that much. Okay. I believe Ghostbusters was late 80s, and then when did the second one come out?
Or early
80s, mid 80s, and then 89. Yeah, so I really wasn't into it that much. I was more into the 90s stuff, like we talked about, Nightmare Before Christmas, things like that type of spiel. But Ghostbusters, of course, everybody knows the Ghostbusters song, right? That might be more popular than the movies, I'd say, honestly. The imagery there is still there. It's something that carries on. Ghostbusters has a big impact, and I think it has impact that's multi-generational, right? Kids can still relate to it now because of the imagery that they use, and then adults can relate to it as well because it came out, obviously, in the 80s. So it's one of those things that can kind of transcend time, so you got to give it respect for that. But personally, I'm not really that into Ghostbusters. I've never actually seen Ghostbusters all the way through. I've seen bits and pieces. Like I said, I know enough to speak on it lightly, but not to go into depth about it. But yeah, like I said, you got to pay respect to it because it's something that has been able to last 40 years. And it's just wow, if it wasn't good, if it didn't have any cultural impact, it would have been out of here. So I give them credit for that. But that's that's my opinion on the Ghostbusters thing. But I'm sure Buttons has a lot for us here.
Yeah, so Ghostbusters for me, it's always going to be one of my Halloween favorites. Pull out those movies and rewatch them. My boyfriend's also really big into the Ghostbusters, so it's definitely material that I'm very familiar with and can speak to as far as comparing the old with the new version, and the version, of course, that we shall not mention. But one of the things for me for Ghostbusters, again, it's a very heavy 80s, series. It's got a lot of the same, common themes and common, practical effects and things that you would see from the 80s. Now, as far as the writing material and that goes, it has spawned, fan fiction and video games and, lots of kind of copycat and, the lore of it is definitely there. We had animated series, which, I didn't watch all of the animated series, but I remember, when I was growing up catching, that animated series on TV as well and seeing Slimer. So, there's a little bit of everything that nobody can probably say that they hadn't seen anything Ghostbusters related. It's just so widespread. Even Neff can probably tell me if he's seen Casper, then you've seen Dan Aykroyd running out of the building going, who are you going to call? Somebody else.
Right.
So, And just with little things like that, you tend to have all of these little pieces kind of come together, and so people recognize the source material even if they haven't seen the movies, even if they're not a huge fan of the movies.
Big in pop culture.
Exactly. It's a very it's huge pop culture. And it's funny because when you look at the original Ghostbusters movie when it came out, I know it was kind of a slow build at first. Like, people were kind of unsure about it when it first came out. Studios especially, they were kind of like, I don't know, like, let's see how it does. But it became so great. That's why the second movie, when it came out, it had a much heftier budget in order to create some of those special effects and things like that you saw with the first one. But you got to remember, during that time when Ghostbusters came out, there's some big names attached to it. Bill Murray and Dan Aykroyd, they were, SNL, huge stars as far as that goes. So they were well-known actors, and Harold Ramis, I mean, his writing, it just was easy to follow and was easy to, present on the big screen. It made, a great story. And even, with the first reboot, Afterlife, he was still attached to the story on that because that was originally going to be the third Ghostbusters movie.
That's right.
That, got stuck in that pre-production phase and never really got out there while he was still alive. Which, of course, if you know the actors, Harold Ramis, he ended up, I believe, getting cancer.
Yeah.
And so he passed before that third movie could ever be made. And so it's unfortunate for him, but you do have that legacy that kind of lives on through him with these new movies that came out.
Yeah. Yeah, and also, too, just to add, in talking about the cast, even the supporting cast was pretty big. If you want to talk about, like, how big the cast was at the time, Sigourney Weaver, man, she was having the best
Yeah, she got
time
that
ever.
Aliens,
All
yeah.
the Aliens movies, like, at the time, the Aliens movies were popping. That was pretty new back then. And then we're like, you know what, we're going to take this actress from the Aliens movies, these serious horror movies, and put her in this
comedy.
Put her in this comedy.
Yeah.
But it worked.
Yeah,
And
and
she-
even Rick Moranis was a
Absolutely.
great choice for that first movie. Well, and he was in the second one too. But his character, he'd had the what was the one with the plant?
I know what you're talking about. Seymour.
Yeah, Seymour.
Little House of Horrors.
Little Shop of Horrors.
Little Shop of Horrors,
Little Shop
sorry.
of Horrors. So, I mean, he's coming off of Little Shop of Horrors, and he would have also, I believe, either already had done or maybe was about to do the Spaceballs movie. So, I mean, he was also a big name during that time. And, I'm not sure as far as filmography goes if Cart Before the Horse, but, I mean, he would have also done, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids or Blew
Yeah.
Up the Kids or all those movies. So he was a big name as well to be attached to Ghostbusters.
You're absolutely right.
And he did such a great job with that character too.
Absolutely agree. I cannot agree with that enough.
What do you guys think about direct comparisons between Ghostbusters 1 and 2? I know Kage had a lot to say about this as far as like the fandom accepting Afterlife or in Frozen Empire. Like I guess what I'm saying is the parallel between the two. I know you had said something to the effect that Ghostbusters 1 was a hit. It was kind of really big. People kind of accepted it as it was.
Yeah.
And then when the second one came out, it was more of a cult-like film, and it didn't get so much the praise that the first one got. And you were theorizing that maybe Frozen Empire will do the same as Ghostbusters 2 in comparison to Ghostbusters.
So
from the 80s.
Afterlife,
Right,
Yeah,
he's
so-
saying it may be the
Empire.
same type of reaction.
Yeah, Neff and I, we talked about this off mic a few times now. So in the 80s, Ghostbusters came out in 1984. I was 1. And so anyway, that movie was very, very well received for the time. It had a budget of 25 to 30 mil, and box office made 295.2 mil. So it was pretty successful, okay? And so nobody knew what this was. What are you doing? Ghosts? Comedy? And they pulled it off. They made it work. So now that they've established that, they've set the stage, now they made Ghostbusters 2. Ghostbusters 2 came out in '89, and that had a budget of 30 to 40 million with box office of 215.
So a little less.
Little less. Now it was criticized because the humor was kind of rehashed. Also, the humor was kind of dumbed down a little bit. In the first movie, you kind of had Bill Murray's character, Peter Venkman, kind of making adult humor. There was a ghost.
More sexual.
Right.
Jokes.
There was a ghost that was trying to remove Ray's belt in bed. He's like hovering over him.
Yeah.
And it's funny to think about that because I saw that as a kid, and it didn't. I'm a kid. I don't know. And I went back and watched it as an adult. I'm like, wow, they put this on. They put people were taking their kids to this, but.
Well, and that has to do with the rating system back in the 80s and
absolutely.
how much it's changed. So you bring up a good point as far as, did we go from, this being more of an adult movie to perhaps the audience that they were aiming for with the second one was probably a younger audience. For those people who really enjoyed the first one and took their kids, and their kids were maybe the ones pushing for that second one more so than the older audience.
Yeah, no, I agree with that 100%. Because in Ghostbusters 2, they had to tone down that adult-themed comedy to make, I don't want to say more accessible because parents were taking their kids, aka me, taking
no more gatekeeper and keymaster.
Yeah, right. And it's funny because Ghostbusters 2 was kind of, it was kind of frowned upon review-wise back when we had Siskel and Ebert and stuff. But as Neff mentioned, it has a cult following. If you talk to people about Ghostbusters 2 back in the day, they still talk about iconic scenes as if they just saw it. For me, most notably, I like the scene when, I like so many scenes. Obviously the Keymaster, they're acting weird. We got to get these two together. They kept talking about that. The slime coming out of the bathtub, the toilet. Fun fact, that scared the heck out of me as a child. But going back to the main point, Ghostbusters, it got lesser reviews. And so now we bring it to Afterlife. Afterlife was absolute fan service. For those that were fans of the original film, it was so many references, so many callbacks from cast to jokes to things in the background. Like I could tell, I remember what that is, or I know what that character is referencing, even though I haven't seen these movies in such a very long time. And then Frozen Empire came out, and to my surprise, I was reading online, Frozen Empire got bad reviews. Me personally, I would give, I gave Afterlife a 9 out of 10. I really, really enjoyed it. I highly recommend you go see it. If you've been on the fence or haven't seen it, please go see it. If you've been a fan of the 80s movies, trust me, you will not be disappointed. Because for me, I'm not going to lie to you folks, I got teary-eyed at the end. And it was for a very specific reason, because I got to see my childhood heroes fighting ghosts. And for that moment, I was 5 or 6 years old all over again. It brought back just a flood of memories, like watching, because I watched the movies, I watched the cartoon in the 80s. I had all the toys, the proton pack, the trap, the action figures, the slime. I had it all. And so it kind of brought me back to that. But I went to go see Frozen Empire yesterday, as a matter of fact, and I gotta say, I really enjoyed it. I gave it a 7 out of 10. Okay, I just said 9 out of 10 for Afterlife, but 7 out of 10 for Frozen Empire. And the reason why I say that is because there's just some little things that I got a nitpick about, not enough to take me out of the experience. Like they brought back the old guys again. I was good with that. They brought back the secretary, and they brought in the Buttons.
Fire Master.
Well, the fire master. Yeah, that was where it got a little weird for me.
Oh, you're talking about the mayor.
No, we're gonna get to that. We're gonna get to that. But they brought
Or
back.
are you talking about the librarian? Well,
Oh,
I
you're
mean, there was
talking
a lot
about-
of little
there's-
cameos.
yeah, I
so
like
I'm kind
the-
of confused where
okay,
you're going with that.
okay, I like the
'Cause
cameos,
they
but here-
brought back some cameos from the original '80s cast that kind of played these little bit parts here and there.
Yeah.
And of course, the mayor was actually one of the main antagonist characters from the second film. And so they brought him back as an antagonistic character as well as the mayor of New York City for this Frozen Empire.
Right, and I'm gonna get more on that in a second. Well, what I'm talking about was they brought back the secretary and
Right.
they suited her up, and I'm like,
Yeah, Annie Potts. Yeah.
yeah, and I was like, okay, but she just suited up, didn't really do anything. And it's kind
Well,
of
she had the proton pack at one point, so she did start to participate. The thing that to me is kind of an inconsistency is,
Yeah.
in the first two Ghostbusters movies, she's not active at all as a Ghostbuster.
Right.
She's purely the secretary. She just kind of pops in randomly as that character. You never actually see her going out and participating as a Ghostbuster. But with the Frozen Empire, what they were kind of trying to get at is that, unbeknownst to, the people who watched the first two movies, you see that the Ghostbusters, stretched out for a while. And we're not really privy to what happened after the second movie as far as, we just know that there was the dissolvement of the Ghostbusters. And so, the idea that at one point, when they were on the back end starting to go downhill, or maybe back when they needed the most amount of participation because of ghost activity, maybe she was participating or was at least taught how to be a Ghostbuster, even though she wasn't ever used as a Ghostbuster. But Frozen Empire kind of suggests that that's what it was, so that she would know how to be a Ghostbuster. And maybe in the animated series, maybe they kind of touch on that with her character, but I don't remember her actually ever being an active, proton pack wearing.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely
out in
right.
the field. So those little inconsistencies like you're talking about, those are kind of scattered throughout Frozen Empire. As far as like, how did he become the mayor? This guy from the EPA who kind of, was put in a bad way at the end of the second Ghostbusters movies because of his treatment of the Ghostbusters. It is kind of like one of those things where it's like, okay, so somehow he managed to spin his political career around to become the mayor. So you kind of have to look at the writing and go, okay, well, they're just trying to give us these cameos. So
Yeah.
you kind of have to accept that as the reality as they're presenting it to you. Same thing with Annie Potts' character. Somehow, what was her name?
Janine.
Yeah, Janine. But you see her getting suited up, and you're like, wait a minute, why is she getting suited up? I thought she was
Yeah,
just the secretary. It was kind of easy to believe in the original, or not in the original, but in Afterlife when she shows up playing more of a secretarial role again, as kind of being like, oh yeah, I just helped keep the lights on for Peter.
Peter
Or not,
Venkman?
no, not Peter Venkman, excuse me, for
Egon?
Spangler,
Yeah.
for Aegon's, for his farm. So he has like a dirt farm, and there's like, that's kind of the joke in Afterlife,
Yeah.
is he's like, oh, he's got this dirt farm. Oh, that's the dirt farmer guy, and nobody really knew what he was doing, but she was assisting with him and she kind of comes back and tries to explain to the family, to Egon's family, like, oh yeah, she's like, yeah, we don't, like, he just kind of had a falling out with the group and he kind of went off on his own. And she's like, I was just kind of helping facilitate, as like the executor of his will, or, kind of, like I said, still playing the secretarial role. And I know you even spoke, Kage, about it briefly the other day when we were talking about the fact that in the first movie, Egon is very oblivious to like any advances that she was making towards him, kind of like sexual overtures, trying to be like, hey, and he was just like right over his head,
I collect molds and funguses.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like, what are your hobbies? And yeah, exactly. He's mold and funguses. Yeah. That's a good time for me.
Yeah. Well, like, kind of going back to Frozen Empire, I guess my criticism was it kind of had an Avengers moment where everyone is suiting up because there's a big challenge coming to threaten
big bad.
Manhattan.
Yeah.
And like, I was like, okay, I know about the family.
Was it just them alluding to her being more of an active participant that was confusing? Where it's like
Well,
she's never been an active
it was
participant.
for me. It was kind of a letdown because it was like building up. It's like we don't just have the family from Afterlife suiting up. Now I have all these side characters from the
up
first
as well.
movie all suited up. It's like, okay, we went from 4 to like 8 or whatever. I'm like, okay, this is going to be a big battle, and it was a big battle. But all those people that suited up, they really didn't do anything very much. They suited up. They were there kind of as I don't want to use the word filler.
But you're right. You didn't have this big battle that you were hoping for after seeing them all get suited up. You were like, you were expecting more. You're like, all right, let's have this moment. And then it was kind of a letdown. And I don't want to give the spoiler away for people who are still going to go see that movie. But I definitely agree, Kage. There was that moment where you're like, all right, let's have this epic battle. And then it kind of fell short.
Yeah. So, and one thing I'll say too is we were talking about Peck. Okay. This is a little thing that made me smile.
Yeah, that's the mayor, right?
Yeah, there were a lot of Easter eggs in this movie referencing to Ghostbusters 2, and he was one of them. As soon as they said Mayor Peck, I caught that immediately, and he's the enemy of the Ghostbusters. He wants to shut them down 30-something years ago, and he wants to shut them down now. And there's a part in the movie where he's shouting, I'm going to shut you down, blah, blah. And somebody in the background in the movie yells, Dickless, like that. And I cracked up because I'm like, oh, that's a callback to Bill Murray's joke. It's like, yes, Your Honor, it's true. He has no dick. That's what they said in the 80s. So that's what that. And it was funny because they said that, and I'm the only one that laughed in the theater. And when the movie ended, everybody was laughing. It was a full house, by the way. I don't know what they're talking about online. This movie got a 4 out of 10. No, it was entertaining. Not as good as Afterlife, but good in its own right, definitely. But I told the people sitting next to me, we were all kind of talking about it. And when I mentioned that, they were like, oh, I didn't realize that. You're right. I do remember that, And they're like, yeah, I kind of want to watch Ghostbusters 2 again. And we talked about that in a little bit in Dune. We're hoping that this story was so good, this movie is so good that people are going to want to go back and see the book or read the book. Same with Ghostbusters. These jokes that I'm telling to people, hopefully it'll kind of make them want to go, I want to go back and watch
And
the
catch all the Easter eggs.
Yeah, because there was a lot of references in there. I'll have to look it up, but there was another character, if you remember, it might have been in 1 or 2. No, it was in 1, where the Ghostbusters go to a banquet hall, like a really fancy place.
You're talking about the librarian guy.
No, not the librarian.
Oh, you're not talking about the guy who was like chasing him outside, going like, "You can't come in the library, like you're not allowed in here."
No.
Because he was in one of the originals as well, that actor.
No, they go into a room, like a giant ballroom, like tables,
in a hotel. Yeah, it was.
It was really fancy and everything. And then he goes, "All right, I'm gonna break this door down," and they open it up. And he's like looking at the destruction, and he goes, "I'm not going to pay a cent for this." Okay, then we'll put it back. And they're like, "No, I'll pay. I think they brought him back for Frozen Empire, but he looked really old, and the camera even zoomed in like they wanted you to know something about this particular.
That was the librarian.
Oh, that was the librarian.
That was the librarian.
Okay.
Yeah, he was the same guy. He was the same actor. But they made him the guy who was the librarian, who was all like, no, you can't come in here.
Okay.
Like, you're not supposed to be in here. You're not allowed back in the library.
Again,
I'm pretty sure that
me
was
want
the
to watch.
same guy.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
But I mean, as far as like, like you were mentioning, all these little Easter eggs and things like that. And again, I feel I gave the movie a 7 out of 10 as well, for Frozen Empire. And again, it was like little things where you could tell, and again, I mentioned that, the writing was different, the director, he was different, but basically, if you're gonna, as Neff mentioned, if you're gonna do a direct comparison to how these movies performed, I would say definitely this new franchise performed exactly as the old one did. Ghostbusters 1 was great. Nobody really had any problems, lots of praise. The second one, they were kind of like, not as good.
Yeah.
And this one, same thing. Afterlife comes out, everybody's like, yeah, wonderful, we loved it. Paying homage to the originals. And then Frozen Empire, they're like, okay, yep, there were some good parts, but there were some kind of weird parts that kind of fell, I personally think maybe with the storyline a little bit more than anything else. And that was kind of the same thing with the second one, is the storyline was just not as good. There was parts of it, like you said, the jokes, some of the stuff. The nostalgia is still there with the second movie for Frozen Empire, but it's not as much. And I think some of the creative ways that they were trying to push the story forward didn't always work as well.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the biggest things with Frozen Empire that, we haven't really touched on is this character of this ghost that Phoebe befriends. And she's a great character and everything, but it's a different interaction than we've seen in any of the other Ghostbuster movies, because she's directly interacting with this ghost throughout the entire movie. And it just seems kind of weird, because the only other time that we see that in the franchise is when you have a demon conversing, like a demon overlord kind of guy conversing with a minion. And that was in the first one. I can't remember what his name was. Do you remember he had like a really weird name. The first guy that was in the painting.
Oh, Vigo
or something, right?
Yeah.
So that's really the only conversation that you have with kind of like these spiritual, apparitions or whatever. And in Frozen Empire, they introduced this girl that, Phoebe is just like talking to the whole time. And she's like, hey, having these conversations and building like this relationship of, like, hey, I'm kind of this friendless person. And yeah, I'm kind of this friendless person as well. And they kind of form this bond, which is pivotal to the story. But again, with the introduction of all these other different little things, and I know we were talking about, because Neff had brought up before we were discussing, like, when you bring back these old original characters into the story, just like they did with the Jurassic Park movies, with Dominion, Jurassic World, Dominion, they brought in the OG cast, and you're like, hey, what's going on with this? I will say Frozen Empire did it better. They incorporated the original characters better than they did in Dominion, because with Dominion, it felt very choppy. It felt like we're going to bounce between our new characters and what's going on with them, and then we're going to bounce over to our old characters and what's going on with them. And there wasn't really a very good fusion of them.
Cohesion.
Yeah, but with Frozen Empire, you have a lot more interconnected activity. It made sense how these characters are connecting with each other. Dan Aykroyd's character, he's like got a purpose, and it all ties in and connects back to the story. It's not just like, oh, here he is randomly doing a thing because plot, because he has to carry the story forward. It actually was connected and made sense.
And it made sense throughout.
For his character to be there,
Let's touch on, we kind of touched on it earlier, but the cultural impact of Ghostbusters today still as a franchise. What do you guys think about that? Especially you guys being heavy into Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
Like I said, the song, super impactful still. The logo, you see that logo, you know what that is. So those are a couple things that I can just point out where it's like, even if you haven't seen Ghostbusters, you see that logo, oh, that's Ghostbusters.
Yeah.
So what do you think, Kage? And then we'll go to buttons again.
I mean, you pretty much said it, Neff. There's the Ghostbusters franchise spans 40 years, I don't care who you are, where you live, whether you're into Ghostbusters or not. Everybody knows what that symbol means of the ghost, the no ghost. Everybody knows how you finish, who you're gonna call. Someone's gonna make that reference. Someone's gonna get that. And just the staying power of the franchise as a whole, you got to think about it because, yeah, we had the movies in the 80s, and then we had an animated series in the 80s. Then in the 2000s, they came up with Extreme Ghostbusters. They're still bringing it back. And now we have Afterlife, we have Frozen Empire kind of keeping it going. I don't know if we can say it's going to be like Batman, where every so years we're going to have another Ghostbusters movie, just like Batman. Time will tell. But yeah, it's really great to see this generation getting to see Ghostbusters. Hopefully, it'll stay a part of American culture for years to come. But Buttons, what do you think?
So I do think that there is definitely a huge cultural impact from this franchise. And I would even make the argument that, we have a lot of these reality shows and that are about trying to capture ghosts.
Yeah.
And, like on film, they're like, hey, let's go do this paranormal investigation and all of that. And this is basically, what Ghostbusters was originally. You have, them saying, yeah, we're going to go in and we're going to get rid of this problem for you. And they're listening to people's, situations and instances. And I mean, so you've got back in the 80s and early 90s and that you had this, and then Michael J. Fox did another ghost movie, Frighteners, right? I think that kind of is not necessarily a spin-off of Ghostbusters, but kind of a like, hey, let's do another movie that involves these ghosts. So I think, long-term, impact over cinema as well, where you see like these different movies because they realize, hey, Ghostbusters worked. Let's do a different take. And that
like
Frighteners,
comedy ghost movies.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you're right. I didn't even think about that.
And then even a movie that came out, I believe in the early 2000s called Odd Thomas, which again is kind of very similar, although that one was more serious. But there was a little bit of comedy to it as well.
Yeah.
But it kind of had that same kind of Ghostbusters, Frighteners vibes to it. Before, of course, they bring back with Afterlife. And, again, we talked about the games that, came out. And those games were very popular, these Ghostbuster games.
Yeah, I forgot to mention that.
That they had. So, I mean, because I know Donnie's played them, and one of the reasons why he even really enjoyed it is because he knew that the story that the game was based off of what the third movie was going to be. So, I think that as far as cultural impact, you have a lot of things where you could definitely make the argument that would not have happened if not with the first original Ghostbuster movies.
Yeah.
With that being said, great points, both of you guys. So we talked about the budget here. I don't know if we went so much into the box office. Kage might have talked about it a little bit. But the budget, we have $100 million for Frozen Empire. And currently, we're sitting at $108 million at box office. So with that being said, guys, do you think the studio goes in with another Ghostbusters and keeps the same cast? Do you think they even make another Ghostbusters? And would you like to see another Ghostbusters with this cast? Or would you like to see a different angle here? Because from the looks of it, it's not going to do well at all. And it's very interesting. Like we said with Kage and Buttons, I know she agreed. We talked about the reception of Ghostbusters 1 and 2, and then Ghostbusters Afterlife and Frozen Empire. It seems like the reception is going in the same trajectory. Now, in comparison to Ghostbusters 2, I don't know if Frozen Empire is doing as well as Ghostbusters 2 did perform. I don't think it is, based off what I'm looking at. They're barely breaking even on production budget. We're not even, we're not even looking into the promotion behind this. So just production, they're barely breaking even. Yeah. But with that being said, do you think that the studio decides to take another chance with this cast? Or do you think they say, you know what, let's go back to the drawing board. The reviews aren't that good. despite individual people saying, I thought it was good, this and that, the reviews overall, the general consensus is that the movie's probably not that good. Do you think that the studio steps back and tries to circle their wagons, or do you think they kind of say, we'll give it one more shot and we'll see what happens, and if nothing really pans out for us, then we'll take a step back? And would you guys, like I said, like to see that?
Yeah.
Start with you, Buttons.
Yeah, I'm going to go ahead and jump in here. So, we talked about the budget for Afterlife versus Frozen Empire back when, what we were seeing is Afterlife had a smaller budget. And again, because the studio was kind of taking a bet on relevancy, like, hey, how much are people going to want to see this reboot, especially after the poor reception from the movie, the all-female cast led Ghostbusters. And of course, it came with great reviews, and everybody liked it. As far as the people who actually went and saw the movie, the average moviegoer, but then they gave it an even bigger budget. And I remember talking to Neff about this, as I said, I don't think that was a good idea. I think that the studio kind of really shot themselves in the foot by giving them that big of a budget. I want to say Afterlife was kind of in the 60 to 70 range as far as their production budget. And again, you've got this introduction of these new characters, which is probably where they saved a little bit of money there. And the special effects that they had in Afterlife weren't so extreme. You had some CGI. You had these cute little psychotic little marshmallows, bouncing around, and they were a good time. And then, of course, you had the morphing dogs, just like from the first one, gatekeeper and
Keymaster.
Keymaster. So you had that rehashing of that original idea. There's definitely CGI in it, but I think they had a little bit more some practical effects that kind of scaled back their production budget. And with Frozen Empire, they threw a lot more money at it, and I think that ultimately hurt them. So now when you're looking at, some of that nostalgia's worn off, it's not quite as shiny anymore. And again, as I mentioned, the story is not quite as put together as Afterlife was. And so I think people sitting down watching this movie, they're kind of going, it's kind of lost its luster. It's kind of lost its momentum. So I don't think these studios are going to greenlight another movie.
Yeah.
And especially because you've got this cast that they've kind of played out their story. Like, I'm not going to give away the whole, story between these two movies, but they did kind of put a little bow on it, as far as the characters. They kind of had their moment where they're like, all right, where are we going with these characters? Let's give kind of a finishing, or kind of like a nice little way to end the involvement of really even the original cast, where it's kind of like, okay, we know where they went. Because obviously, I'm sure fans from the original franchise were like, hey, what happened? And even with Afterlife, they were like, well, where are they now? And so I think with this Frozen Empire movie, I think they kind of wrapped it up to where people would be happy if this was the end. Like, I think they would kind of be like, all right, we got what we wanted, and we're good. And I think the studios are sitting there going to go, yeah, it's not worth making another one, especially when they threw so much money and it's getting such a poor reception.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a fault of the actors. I think the actors did all wonderful job. And as far as the casting goes for it, I feel like they did a really great job for what they did. But story-wise, it's kind of a dead zone right now. It doesn't really. They didn't set it up for another sequel. They didn't really push it.
Left it open.
They kind of left it open if they wanted to do something, but at the same time, I feel like there was a solid end for most of the characters.
Yeah.
What do you think, Kage?
So I, first and foremost, in terms of Afterlife, I really enjoyed it. The callback jokes, calling back the old cast. I caught a lot of those reference jokes. I saw the things in the background. I liked the cast, and I liked the new cast. I liked the chemistry that they had. It was cool. It was really cool seeing that come together. And in Frozen Empire, okay, they're kind of a family of Ghostbusters now. And I'm like, I can get behind this. I think I can go either way, honestly. If this was it, and we just don't get another Ghostbusters movie and maybe years down the road, I'd be fine with that. If they did do it again, I would like them to get the same cast, get the family, bare minimum, because like Buttons just said, we already know what the former Ghostbusters are doing. Winston is a rich philanthropist,
Yeah,
right?
well,
And-
he's like behind the scenes funding of
Right. Like
you
they're
know.
all attached to the paranormal in
Yeah,
some
still,
some
yeah.
way. Ray still runs his shop that he ran in the 80s.
Well, Venkman's really the only one who isn't really doing much with ghosts.
Right. Yeah, he works he works kind of in there. I don't know, he's not really doing anything concrete like the other guys.
I don't even think they really say what he is currently doing. He just kind of shows up like, hey.
He shows up. Yeah.
He's like, hey, what's
And-
going on, guys? And like just randomly, did somebody call for,
Yeah.
Yeah,
that kinda
so
thing.
he shows up. So but my point is though, I would
But Ray and Winston, they definitely are well established as far as what their characters are doing and still being attached to paranormal activity.
If we did if they did another film, I would definitely want them to go back to the writing room and come up with a better story. The fire master thing, I was kind of, I don't know, it really wasn't doing anything for me. It was great to see the old guys again. If they made another movie, do I need the old guys back? I'm ready to let go, as sad as that might sound to some people out there.
It prevents from spoiling those characters as well. They get
Yeah,
to,
yeah,
they get to go out on a high
The longer
note.
you keep going, the
Yeah, well, we talked about that.
Harder it
We
gets to
talked
keep
about
it.
that with sequels.
Yeah.
The more John
Consistent
Wick
at a good
movies you
level,
have,
yeah.
the more you dilute the
Correct,
story. You
correct.
dilute the character's legacy now
Yeah.
if you keep putting them out there.
Right.
So if we were to have a new Ghostbusters movie, I would like the family. I want to see them again. I like their chemistry, but I'm ready to let the old guys, okay, I
Yeah.
see what they're doing, I don't need to see them again. But they're going to have to go back to the writing room and really do that better.
Hammer it.
The one thing I want to leave out on is this. The director for the original Ghostbusters movie was Ivan Reitman, however you pronounce it. He did the original movies, 1 and 2, and with Afterlife, he was also behind that. And then his son took over to write Frozen Empire. So it's interesting, we were talking about before, Neff, that the first one was such a success, and the second one was good. Not great, it was just good. It was lesser, but then over the years, it kind of gained a cult following. Whereas now, with these new movies, with Afterlife and Frozen Empire, again, it's kind of a return. I feel like Afterlife was a return to form, bringing it to modern day audiences. Well executed, well done. But Frozen Empire kind of fell flat. Time will tell if has a cult following in the years to come. The only the real spoiler I will give you is like at the end of Frozen Empire, it says for Ivan.
Right.
That's
the
what-
director.
Right, because he passed away and his son took over and co-wrote on this. Just like at the end of Afterlife, they said for Harold.
Right.
Because this movie is in memory of Egon. And one last little Easter egg. This is just my speculation. There's a character in Frozen Empire that screams Egon to me in appearance. Okay, go back and look up YouTube clips of Egon in the 1980s animated show, the cartoon, the blonde guy with the glasses.
Oh, the scientist.
The scientist, and then they have a scientist, and I'm like, I wonder if that was on purpose. That's just my speculation, but I think that's about it. We're gonna close it out on Ghostbusters. So, what do you think? Do we have any fans out there of the original series, or did you come in as a fan in the new series? Let us know what you think. Please like, comment, and subscribe, and let us know what you're thinking. I'm your host Kage,
Neff,
And Buttons.
and we will see you next time.
be safe.